An appeal to the BBC from Britain's Tigrayan community, BBC World Service Amharic and Tigrigna programs continuing bias against the people of Tigray, Ethiopia. Mekete Tigray UK, Community of Tigrayan Diaspora in the UK. 1. We, Mekete Tigray UK, are an independent community association of Tigrayan Diaspora in the UK, set up to promote human rights and peace in Tigray, Ethiopia. We are writing this letter to complain yet again about the editorial policy of BBC World Service, Amharic and Tigrigna programs, which are consistently biased against the people of Tigray in Ethiopia. We have written in the past to the Chairperson of the BBC Board, Mr. Richard Sharp, and the Director General, Mr. Tim Davie, and have demonstrated several times in front of the BBC headquarters to demand fair, accurate, balanced coverage and reporting of the crisis in Tigray. Whilst the BBC Amharic and Tigrigna programs, both the online news and radios, report extensively on a wide range of issues occurring in Ethiopia, the programs deliberately and persistently omit major newsworthy issues pertaining to the crisis in Tigray. Specifically, we are referring to the New Lines Institute of Strategy and Policy report on the war in Tigray, which came out on 3rd June 2024. Genocide in Tigray, serious breaches of international law in the Tigray conflict, Ethiopia, and paths to accountability. New Lines Institute report, 3rd June 2024. 3. More than 3 years since the start of the genocidal war in Tigray on 2nd November 2020, the New Lines Institute, a non-partisan global think tank based in Washington, D.C., has conclusively and specifically established, after 2 years of research and analysis involving experts on humanitarian law and genocide, cleansing, war crimes, and crimes against humanity against the people of Tigray, notwithstanding that all parties to the conflict have committed war crimes. Characterized as the worst humanitarian catastrophe in the 21st century, the genocidal war has claimed over 1 million Tigrayan lives. Sexual violence against 120,000 Tigrayan women and girls, weaponization of hunger and starvation as a strategy of war, and the destruction of 85% of Tigray's social fabric, economy, and infrastructure. Landmark report follows the UN Human Rights Council sponsored report by the International Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia, ICHREE Report 2023, the US Department of State Report 2023-2024, the UK Parliament Tigray Inquiry Report 2023, the Yale University Law School Report 2023, Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch Reports 2020, 2021, 2022, 2024 that established the commission of mass atrocities crimes, including ethnic cleansing, crimes against humanity, and war crimes in Tigray. Yet, the above catalogued reports received scant attention by BBC Amharic and Tigrigna programs. Such was the global newsworthy of the report by the New Lines Institute. It was reported amongst others by ABC News, MSN News, CNN, Al Jazeera, Yahoo News, Reuters, AP, The Globe and Mail, Financial Times, The New Humanitarian, WorldPress.com, The National Interest, Africa, Africa Equity Media, MedAfrica Times, Radio Alabama, Delta Daily Newspaper, Observer Diplomat, The East Africa Daily, Somali Times, The North Africa Post, Reddit, HRW, and so on. Not a word from BBC Amharic or Tigrigna. 5. Yet careful monitoring of the BBC World Service Amharic and Tigrigna online news and radio broadcasts for the period through 7th of June 2024 show there is no mention of the New Lines Institute report on the war in Tigray that claimed a genocide have been committed against the people of Tigray. On what ground? does a major report on genocide by a major institution led by internationally recognized legal experts and based on 2 years of study and research is considered not newsworthy by BBC Amharic and Tigrigna. Why do the BBC Amharic and Tigrigna programs believe the people of Tigray and Ethiopians in general do not deserve to know about this report? Is this not a deliberate suppression of information that affected the lives of millions of Tigrayans? Is this not consistent with previous BBC Amharic and Tigrigna editorial policy of not reporting on pertinent issues regarding the conflict in Tigray? For example, in the past, we complained when the BBC Amharic and Tigrigna services failed to report the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church Patriarch's statement on the genocidal war against the people of Tigray, which was then globally reported. 6. The scant coverage of the genocidal war in Tigray and its consequences by the BBC World Service pales into insignificance when compared and contrasted with the saturated news coverage of the humanitarian crisis in Ukraine or the Middle East. It appears to the BBC World Service that Tigrayan, Ethiopian or African lives matter less. 7. I humbly demand the BBC World Service, in particular the Amharic and Tigrigna programs, quality, accuracy, fairness and factual reporting with no distortion or bias. Tigrayans all over the world demand the BBC maintains a high journalistic and moral standard as it did in the 1984 famine in Tigray and Ethiopia at large.
Yet another example of the British bloated corporation. This is absolutely appalling. I just want to say this because what I love about talk is one can be honest. I find any sort of racism abhorrent, okay? But there is absolutely no doubt, if you look at Kazim Sheikh and this story, this was completely different from Michael Vaughan, and the BBC are categorically wrong, aren't they?
Absolutely, and it just shows their double standards here, doesn't it? And this is the thing with the BBC. They don't follow sort of principles in a neutral way. They pick and choose as and when it suits them in order to push a particular agenda. And that's why people across the UK are just so frustrated and disappointed with the BBC and turning off in their droves. You know, we've got millions of people cancelling their TV licenses, doing their research, realising that they don't have to pay for a TV licence if they're not watching live broadcast TV or iPlayer. So yeah, I mean, we see this over and over again from the BBC. But the really frustrating thing is we've had a Conservative government in power now for 14 years who haven't done anything with this. They sort of kick it into the long grass. They say, oh, we'll look at that. You know, Boris said we're going to look at that. But then do nothing about it because they don't want to upset them, you know, and this is the scary thing. So yeah, it is frustrating, and it's really frustrating for our supporters out there who just see this sort of going on, this hypocrisy.
And I had a debate with my daughter the other day, because we have really quite feisty debates, because she's at university and she's 20 and she thinks that everybody in my generation should die, really, I think, to be honest, and their opinions are pointless. And I say to her, laughs at me, I say, listen, absolutely love the fact you have opinions, but you will not have me criticising or slagging off everything that your grandparents taught me. Stuff from the past, like D-Day today, is well worth educating the younger generation with. I mean, the thing about the BBC for me is, and I always want to ask you, it seems to me to be full of people with an agenda. It seems to be that there is a political agenda, an ideological agenda, which is allowed to be pushed upon all of us. And you get annoyed because if you're like me, you go, well, hold on a minute, I'm paying your damn wages. And I don't see that balance. And it's easy for people to say, oh, you're on tour, you're on commercial radio, you're slagging off the BBC. No, the foundations of some of the things the BBC in the past have been absolutely appalling. Another example for you today. They've this afternoon issued another apology as they pulled their D-Day programme from iPlayer. Broadcaster Kirsty Young, she's an amazing woman. Kirsty Young anchored the special programme, Tribute to the Fallen, honouring those landings in Normandy. But as the programme live from the Wargrave Cemetery in Bayeux, France, started off camera, an unknown man could be heard saying French bottoms. I don't know the word for it. After being criticised on social media, the Beeb have now apologised. They never seem to be on the front foot, the BBC. They always seem to be on the back foot, and I think the criticism of them is absolutely justified, don't you?
Absolutely, and you can see here, why have they had to pull the whole programme for, you know, someone in the background saying something? I mean, why didn't they just ensure that, you know, somebody wasn't just off camera saying those kind of things anyway? But they don't seem to prioritise the things that the people who are currently, you know, propping up the BBC, sort of the older generation, the things that they really care about. And that isn't the priority. The priority for the BBC is maintaining the TV licence. And therefore, they're sort of bending over backwards to impress.
Tick every box. And it's really, it's really interesting, isn't it? Kazim Sheikh can make what is blatantly racist comments, get away with it. Is it because of the colour of skin? I'm just asking the question. But because some bloke in the back's going, the French are idiots, right? Apparently that's racist. We'll pull the whole goddamn programme, right? I mean, that I don't know how the BBC. I mean, again, obviously, there's two hopes of me working for the BBC: No Hope and Bob Hope. But the truth of the matter is, I don't know how they justify believing that a majority of British people will continue to accept paying for something that is so blatantly biased and just doesn't get it right very often.
Well, this is the thing that's so frustrating for people, because those people who are sort of stuck, who don't have sort of unlimited broadband or whatever, who are stuck sort of watching live broadcast TV, are just frustrated on a daily basis. And we hear from them, you know, constantly about, you know, how can they get out of paying for this? You know, what's going to be done about getting rid of the TV license? And it's so frustrating because they're paying for it and then they're just being insulted on a daily basis by this organisation. And it's so frustrating for them because, you know, they just want to have the choice to say, you know, I don't want to pay for that. If other people want to pay for it, great, but I shouldn't have to, you know, and that's the frustrating thing. And I think it's about time in this general election. I mean, we've been pushing out to all the political parties to find out what's going to be in the manifesto regarding the TV licence. And the only confirmation we've had back so far is from the Reform Party, who said they would definitely scrap it. But we are calling on all of the other political parties to really listen to the polls that have been going on for the last few years, which say that 2/3 of the people in Britain want to get rid of the TV licence. You know, it's a huge percentage.